The courtroom goes quiet as a phone screen appears on the big monitor. A grainy video begins without warning. Inside a dim room, a man's voice is weak, strained, barely a whisper. Seconds pass in silence before the first real words are heard. Then another voice, calm, responding. At the defense table sits Sarah Boone, composed, controlled, seemingly unaffected by what plays out before the jury. Her eyes are steady. Her jaw barely moves. The judge watches the screen, then flicks a glance toward jurors who do not speak. A prosecutor says something low and the video pauses. Timestamps, battery indicators, fill structure. What's unfolding is no ordinary recording. This is evidence that cannot be unwatched. A man trapped, suffering, pleading. What you're about to see unspools across years of conflict, investigation, and testimony. This is the State of Florida via Sarah Boone. This is the suitcase video that ended the defense. To the casual observer, Sarah Boone appears reserved, articulate, controlled. She isn't the kind of person who draws attention online. Her social media is minimal, inconspicuous, nothing like the profiles critics obsess over. There are no staged videos, no curated smiles. Just a life that looks ordinary. But behind closed doors, according to police records, friends and neighbors, the scene was different. Calls to law enforcement were frequent. Broken tempers, bruises, and shouted arguments left marks not always visible in photos. What on the surface looked like an unstable relationship was, prosecutors argue, a storm with patterns, escalation, and consequence. The public face was quiet. The private record was loud. And in court, silence became evidence just as powerful as any audio clip. This story centers in Winter Park, Florida, a suburban enclave of tidy lawns and quiet cul-de-sacs. Most days there is nothing to distinguish this place from any other, but ordinary locales can mask turbulent lives. Here, neighbors called police more than once for domestic disturbances. Sarah Boone and her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr., lived in a townhouse not far from a busy street. They argued. Police reports document visits, responses, exchanges, and cautions. Officers saw torn clothing, agitation, confusion. Nothing ever rose to charges, at least not initially. Their relationship was cyclical. Breakups, reconciliations, police mediations. Each incident seemed momentary, but over months a pattern formed, a dynamic of power, frustration, and repetition. And at the center was a man who would later be found dead and a woman who would stand trial for his death. February 23, 2020 began like any other Sunday in Winter Park. Birds chirped, cars rolled, sunlight lit quiet streets. By evening, tension between Boone and Torres escalated. Neighbors reported loud voices and the arrival of police who mediated once again. According to investigators, later that night, something changed. Jorge Torres Jr. ended up in a suitcase inside the home. Why he climbed in is unclear. What happened next was captured on Boone's phone. The footage shows Torres inside the suitcase, asking to be let out, struggling to breathe, his voice fading in urgency. The recording ends abruptly. Hours pass unaccounted for. No calls for help. No intervention from Boone. The next morning, she contacts 911. She reports finding Torres unresponsive inside the suitcase. First responders arrive. They pronounce him dead at the scene. What looked like another tragic escalation of conflict was, investigators determined, a moment recorded in detail. A digital breadcrumb that changed the case forever. Detectives seized Boone's phone soon after responding officers documented the scene. Inside the device was the video that would become central to the prosecution's narrative. Metadata showed it was recorded the night before the 911 call, not at the EA. A moment of discovery. Timestamps aligned with battery indicators and app logs. Investigators examined the full media directory, uncovering other recordings, some partial, some overwritten. None directly contradicted the central clip, but all contributed to a timeline that refused to align with Boone's early statements. Call logs, screen-on times, motion data. Each element narrowed the story. Body cam footage from responding officers revealed Boone's demeanor changed as statements shifted. Early accounts lacked consistency. Later ones attempted to reconcile what the video already showed. No third-party intrusion evidence existed, no mismatched fingerprints, no forced entry, no alternative narratives with credible support. In the end, it wasn't a single piece of evidence alone. It was the tapestry of recorded moments, video, logs, timestamps, that made the narrative inevitably point inward. At trial, the prosecution played the suitcase video in full. The room sat in tense silence as the sound of a man pleading for air filled the courtroom. Jurors leaned in. The judge did not flinch. Boone watched with eyes unmoving, expression controlled. Prosecutors called forensic analysts to explain the metadata in plain terms, how timestamps could anchor minutes, hours, even behavior patterns. They walked the jury through Boone's earlier statements and the contradictions that arose when set beside the digital record. The defense argued accident. They questioned context. They pressed for reasonable doubt. But when the prosecutor juxtaposed the 911 call with the original video, courtroom observers say the momentum shifted. Witness after witness testified. Some testified to past disturbances, others to emotional tolls, but the evidence, visual, recorded, logged, remained central. There was no grand spectacle, just a relentless, detail-by-detail unspooling of what happened, how it was recorded, and why it mattered. After deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom barely reacted. Faces remained composed. Some exhaled, others simply stared ahead. The judge imposed a sentence that reflected the gravity of the offense. Life in prison, according to statute, with details outlined in the public record. There was no applause, no outbursts. Family and friends of Jorge Torres Jr. spoke afterward about their loss, describing a life cut short and healing that remains incomplete. Some expressed relief at the verdict. Others spoke quietly about remembrance and enduring grief. Outside, media coverage noted the role of recorded evidence in shaping the outcome. Commentators highlighted how digital traces once dismissed can become central to justice. The sentence closed the courtroom chapter, but the questions lingered beyond it. This case shows how ordinary devices, phones, timestamps, data footprints, can become extraordinary evidence. When memory fails or narratives shift, what remains recorded still speaks. What responsibility do we carry when our devices witness moments we never intend others to see? How should courts weigh digital records when human recollection diverges from what technology preserves? And what does it mean when silence, not spoken words, becomes part of the truth? Think about how evidence, not emotion, shaped this outcome. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more courtroom stories where the record decides the verdict.